Tem um momento na carreira que precisamos dar um passo além. É hora de fazer uma pós-graduação. Só que muitas vezes o custo pesa no bolso, inviabilizando tudo. Com a pós-graduação do Senac, você não tem esse problema. Cursos com até 50% de desconto e muito mais tempo para pagar. TCC opcional, modelo flexível com aulas presenciais e online e alguns cursos com apenas 12 meses de duração. Não tem mais desculpa, hein? Saiba mais em sp.senac.br/pós-graduação.
How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, S-H-O-W, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 2.
My fellow Americans, welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425 should you wish to be on the program. I need to take you across the pond. I could spend every day just putting chum in the water and getting you all worked up about things in Washington and politics, political campaigns, but we live in a highly integrated, interrelated world, and there are things happening that you really, really need to know about. And so we need to go across the Atlantic to West Africa, where events are dramatically changing things. And those events are working against us. And they have a lot to do with the Biden administration's policies. And I need to explain this one for you because he's not directly related to what's happening. Take Biden out of the picture. The problem, however, is the worldview of the progressives within the State Department who lack answers for what to do. When you're a progressive and you have a progressive worldview, your view is that the United States should not be the leader of the world because we got there through colonialism, and colonialism and white supremacy are bad, and the United States is at the forefront of it, so we need to step back and take a hands-off approach. What the Biden administration has done around the world is to pull back American engagement in certain countries, particularly African nations, to allow a greater sense of self-determination in those countries, which sounds good in theory. In practice, however, it's starting to hurt us. There have been a series of coups in the Sahel, which is the portion of Africa that stretches into the Sahara. Burkina Faso has had a coup. Mali has had a coup. And now Niger has had a coup. There's turmoil as well in Chad and Sudan. What's notable is that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, once the coups were had, the military juntas that have taken over have turned to the Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians. In fact, it's pretty clear that what's happening in these countries is the Russians, to undermine our efforts in Ukraine, have been trying to undermine our efforts in West Africa to stamp out Islamofascism and Islamic extremism. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, and even northern Nigeria, Chad, they have been a growth spot for Islamic radicalism. We've had military operations in Niger. In fact, we've had a military base in northern Niger near Libya that we can use to then take out Islamic terror operations in that region. Not Nigerians. Nigeria is its own company, their own country. The people of Niger, the military junta there is ordering the United States out of Niger. Now, had we played a game in West Africa that did not involve us believing we were colonial white supremacists, racists who shouldn't be there, we could have been more aggressive helping prop up the democratic regimes. We walked away from helping the democratic regimes in this part of the world, even though we had military assets on the ground there, because we didn't want to be seen as colonizers. We didn't want to stigmatize those democratic regimes. But by walking away because we didn't want to stigmatize them, we've enabled the military coups to take place backed by the Russians. And now they're throwing us out. And now this is notable in Niger. You know what the military junta there has done? Now that they're telling us to get out of the country and close up our air base, we've pumped a lot of resources into Niger. We were backing the democratic regime in Niger. We stopped backing the democratic regime. We stopped helping the Nigerian police and military assets there. We stopped helping them economically. Now there's been a military coup by a portion of the military, and they've now agreed to sell uranium to the Iranians while supplementing their military support from the Wagner Group from Russia. Y'all, they're turning their backs on the rise of Islamic fascism and Islamic terrorism. They're throwing Americans out. They're allying with the Russians, the Iranians, and the Chinese. They're building an axis of evil before our very eyes. And the Biden administration is clueless how to respond because, again, they're overrun in the State Department with a bunch of progressive wokes who believe that we're to blame for all of this. So they're not engaged in an aggressive response. By the way, Nigeria has had to walk back the sanctions that they were putting on Niger because the Americans, the Biden administration, wouldn't back the Nigerians with their sanctions. The whole sanction regime began to collapse. And in northern Nigeria, there's a massive Muslim population that is friendly to the Niger majority Muslim population and started rioting in the streets over the Nigerian sanctions on Niger and its military junta, and the Americans wouldn't help the Nigerians. The Biden administration wouldn't help the Nigerians. We're causing political turmoil across Western Sahara. The Russians are funding them because the Russians hope that we'll divert the resources we were sending to Ukraine to the Sahel region of Africa to combat Islamic fascists. And by the way, it's working. We're being played, and we're doing this. This sets up hotspots in Africa along with alliances for Iran. Tom, welcome to the program. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good. What's going on?
So I was asking, you answered a lot of the questions there. You had talked about the Sahel and how our influence or actions we had either not taken or taken that are diminishing our influence there. And so I was wondering if you could you've named a few of them, but I was just wondering if you could maybe name some other things within Africa as a whole. As a side note, I just traveled to Uganda, which is in East Africa, for a few weeks at the end of December, and I can tell you that they're not big fans of the Biden administration for the most part.
Yeah, they're not, and the Kenyans aren't, and the Kenyans aren't because the Kenyans are deploying police resources now to Haiti, and the Kenyans are imploring us to deploy police resources to Haiti, and we're not deploying anything to Haiti. And so the Kenyans actually, the president of Kenya expressed some exasperation over the weekend that why are we sending people halfway around the world when the United States is right there? We're also turning a blind eye to the South African arms production for Iran and Russia. We're giving subsidies to the South African government right now, food subsidies, among other things. And the South Africans, instead of spending their money on food subsidies, are spending their money on making military weapons for Russia and for Iran right now. It is just a complete mess what this administration is doing. And again, it comes back to the worldview. When the worldview is that we are a colonizing power, we shouldn't do anything that will allow people to be perceived as colonizing. And that means getting out of countries when the military juntas take over, not supporting the democratic regimes in these countries that could stop the military from launching coups. And we're dropping the ball on foreign aid. Listen, foreign aid, I know many of you hate it, but it's 1% of the federal budget. 1% of the federal budget is foreign aid. And if you can take that 1% of the federal budget and buy yourself goodwill in Africa to keep our allies in place and avoid having them taken over by the Iranians and the Russians, that's money well spent. It's an investment on our national security at 1% of the federal budget. Now, this gets me to the situation in Haiti. The Biden administration won't send in the Marines. We're having to evacuate Americans from Haiti as best we can. We're not sending in the Marines. And you know what the progressive spin on this Haitian situation is? And I'm not making this up. The progressive spin is that what's happening in Haiti right now is the completion of the Haitian Revolution that began when the United States sent the Marines in World War I under Woodrow Wilson. That's actually the argument of the left, that the Haitians are learning self-governance, and it's a difficult process because of American colonialism in the early 1900s. It's all our fault. That's why Haiti is like Haiti. Never mind that we had to send the Marines in 1917 because Haiti was destabilizing just like they are right now. The left blames America first. We should actually be saying, listen, I get that you don't want to send the military to Ukraine. I don't want to send the military to Ukraine either. I want to send our weapons to Ukraine so they can kill the Russians. I want to send our weapons to Iran or to Israel so they can kill the Iranians and Hamas. But Haiti is in our backyard, and if we don't go to Haiti, the Cubans certainly will. And the Cubans will work with the Chinese. This is our backyard. This is not just the Western Hemisphere. This is very near us. We have a military and geostrategic imperative to not have Haiti turned over to our enemies in our backyard. You think the Cuban Missile Crisis was bad? Wait until the Chinese start a port in Haiti for their military. And the Biden administration won't do anything there. For all of the rhetoric about Donald Trump and the chaos he would bring, none of this chaos existed when he was president. I was watching Amanda Carpenter and Mike Gonzalez debate each other on TV this weekend. So Amanda Carpenter used to work for Jim DeMint. She really hates Donald Trump. She was a personality on CNN. I don't know if she's still there anymore. As a paid contributor from the right who hates Donald Trump. Mike Gonzalez, a friend of mine from the Heritage Foundation, they were arguing over about Donald Trump and what chaos Donald Trump would bring if he came back to the White House. And Mike Gonzalez's response was very straightforward, that there's chaos right now. The chaos is from the Biden administration. There was not a war in Ukraine when Trump was president. There was not a war in Israel when Trump was president. There was not chaos in the Red Sea when Trump was president. We didn't have a series of military coups orchestrated by the Russians and Iranians in West Africa when Trump was president. We didn't have the collapse of Haiti when Trump was president. When Trump was president, we did not have these things. Say what you will about Donald Trump, but I think Vladimir Putin put his finger on it, that Joe Biden is an old school American who's predictable in his actions. Donald Trump's a wild card, and people were scared of that instability when Donald Trump was president. And that instability from Donald Trump brought stability to the world because it was unpredictable what he might do. I have vast concerns about Donald Trump and the presidency. I have vast concerns about his character. But you cannot deny that the situations we're in right now globally did not exist when he was president because his unpredictability made the rest of the world predictable. The world doesn't like unpredictability. Biden is so predictable, it's caused instability in the world because he's so predictable, our enemies know they can play him. Donald Trump's so unpredictable, it forced stability into the world because our enemies did not know how he would respond in a given situation. And that stuff matters. The fact that this administration will not seriously engage in Haiti because they're afraid of being accused of colonialism tells you everything you need to know. We are less safe because of progressive wokeness within this administration. Okay. Did y'all see the putt by Wyndham Clark Yes. Oh my gosh, I feel horrible for the. Oh, so okay, so they're at the what is the tournament down in Florida, the Players, and so Scotty Scheffler is in first place right now, best golfer in the world, and Wyndham Clark is one of I think 2 or 3 people in second place, tied. And had he made this putt, he would have tied with Scheffler for first place. Into the game. And he putts, sails across the green to the hole, goes across the hole, hits the edge, and ricochets back out. And the first of all, the look of stun and shock on Scotty Scheffler's face, and then poor old Wyndham Clark just takes his cap and covers his face, probably saying lots of F-bombs. I felt horrible for the guy. I've rooted for him before he did what he did last year. Just a solid guy. And oh my gosh, what a painful thing to see. But Scotty's just, y'all. I admit I've hit midlife, and now that I'm playing golf, I am attuned to watching golf. I used to never want to watch golf, and then what really got me into like the Players and playing was the Netflix show Full Swing, which is phenomenal. And I haven't started watching the second season yet. It just came out, and I haven't started watching it, but I plan to this week. But it made the game more meaningful. But me playing now, having gotten some lessons, my buddy Kyle Morris is a great golf pro up in North Georgia, and I got some lessons from him. He improved my game better than anybody has. And I like to go. I'm terrible. I am terrible. I get invited to tournaments, and I always say no because I'm still terrible. But I like to play. I follow a guy on Instagram who plays, and guy could be a PGA professional, and he's not. And he always plays by himself because it's his thing to unwind. He leaves his phone behind. I couldn't do that. But he leaves his phone behind and he plays by himself. And he's really, really good, but he doesn't want to play with people, and he doesn't even have a handicap because he's like, I'm never going to do a tournament. I do not have a handicap. If I did, it would be measured in balls lost and beers drunk. But I have no desire to even get ready for handicap. I just want to go enjoy a game outside. But I have now found this love of watching these people play golf because I know how hard it is to see these masterful shots is impressive. But poor old Wyndham Clark in that putt, it was just heartbreaking to see that. Now, we got to move on. Americans for Prosperity has bought Bidenomics.com. This gives you a sense of the incompetence of the Biden campaign. If there's a post-mortem on Biden's loss in November, part of it is going to be this website, Bidenomics.com. The fact that they did not buy that website when it was available, when Biden branded himself with the term and then didn't buy the website, and now Americans for Prosperity has turned it into a documented record of Biden's disastrous economic policies, it's just a big red flag for the malfeasance and malpractice of Biden's campaign. But Americans for Prosperity is taking advantage of it. You can go actually read about Biden's economic record without the spin from the Democrats. They take Joe Biden's quotes about his record and then the facts about his record and expose just how bad the record is, and it's easy for you to share it with your friends and family so they get the real record as well. Americans for Prosperity, they bought Bidenomics.com. You can go to Bidenomics.com, find out all about Joe Biden's record, Bidenomics.com, get the truth about Biden's record, how bad it actually is, how the costs of everything has gone up, how he said it hasn't and yet it has, and inflation's not transitory, it's here. All of that at Bidenomics.com, thanks to Americans for Prosperity. Greetings, America. Welcome. It is Eric Erickson here. The phone number, 877-973-7425. I'm going to discuss religion. You know, I made a whole career out of discussing the topics you're not supposed to talk about. Religion and politics and pineapple on pizza, which is a big no-no. Just saying. I got a friend of mine who wanted me to make him a pizza in my new pizza oven and put pineapple on it, and I told him he needed new friends because he wasn't allowed at my house anymore. I don't understand you people. Nonetheless, I digress. I'm going to talk about religion now, but actually it's a very specific point that has to be made, and it's one that needs to, be regularly reiterated by me because people just tend to forget it. There is a phrase The mainline Protestant church. The mainline. Do you know where mainline comes from? Well, mainline came from the 1920s. There were debates between fundamentalists. Now, I realize you have an image of fundamentalism, but in the 1920s, fundamentalism was not what you think about. Now, fundamentalism were the fundamentals of faith. The fundamentals were a virgin birth, a physical bodily resurrection, the inerrancy of Scripture, the truth that, or the fact of Adam and Eve, not the myth of Adam and Eve, things like that. And the modernists in the 1920s were already calling for we can move beyond the actual factual belief in these things. So the main line was a train line in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Main Line. And the Philadelphia Main Line ran through neighborhoods. At the time in Philadelphia, by and large, the neighborhoods were divided along religious lines. Essentially, the Episcopalians lived with each other. The United Church of Christ lived with each other. The Northern Baptists lived with each other. The Unitarians lived in a neighborhood of Unitarians. The main line came to be representative of those mainline Protestant denominations. So you had American Baptist, you had United Church of Christ, you had Episcopalians, you had the United Methodist Church, you had the Evangelical Lutherans. I'm missing one or two, but those were the main lines. The mainline religious denominations. And so when people talk about the main line, the term comes from the Philadelphia Main Line, which was their streetcar system or train system, and it ran through Philadelphia into neighborhoods where they were largely demographically wrapped around churches. And they happen to be those denominations, the old school Philadelphia denominations. Well, along comes now mainstream religion in this country, and the mainstream and the main line are different things. And unfortunately, the media sometimes uses these interchangeably. So, for example, mainstream Christianity in the United States is actually evangelical Christianity. The Southern Baptists are the largest denomination in the United States. I know the other one I was listening to the main line, the Presbyterian USA, PCUSA. In the 1920s, it was just the Presbyterian Church. They were considered mainline. Well, now you have like this break. I'm in the PCA, the Presbyterian Church in America, which is the evangelical split from the PCUSA. Now, some of this is semantics and stuff you don't have to worry about, but I bring all of this up because one of the people who writes about religion in America fairly regularly is Ruth Graham of the New York Times. And Ruth Graham is prone to not mess up the difference between mainstream Christianity, which is evangelical Christianity in the United States, and mainline Christianity, which is dying. All of the denominations, you should understand, within the main line of Protestant Christendom are dying. In fact, multiple surveys have shown that the last Episcopalian in America has been born. That church is in such decline that it's losing more people than it takes in every year. And statistically, the last Episcopalian walks the earth. The Episcopalians are losing significant churches. The PCUSA is also in significant decline. Well, in contrast to this is evangelicalism, and the media would have you believe it's in decline as well. And some denominations are declining, but actually a lot of those denominations are doing pretty good. Take my own. The PCA is one of the fastest growing denominations in the country. It believes in inerrancy in Scripture, complementarianism in relationships between man and woman, heterosexual marriage, things like that. It's a conservative denomination that's actually doing remarkably well in an age where churches generally seem like they're in decline. The Southern Baptists are shrinking, but a lot of Southern Baptists aren't leaving the church. They're just leaving the non-denominational churches that echo Southern Baptist beliefs. I say all of this to get to this Ruth Graham piece. The headline is Piety and Profanity. The raunchy Christians are here. In the Trump era, a surprising number of evangelicals are rejecting modesty and turning towards the risque. And our kickoff point is this calendar, the Conservative Dad's Real Women of America calendar, a pinup calendar. My friend Dana Lash is in it holding guns at a gun range. Riley Gaines is in it in a swimsuit. And I don't really care about the calendar one way or the other. My friend Allie Beth Stuckey called it soft porn targeted towards married men. There is undoubtedly some variety of vulgarity that's creeping into people who consider themselves of faith. But I would note this again, and this is where the media completely misunderstands the patterns and practice of religion in America today. Do you know the evangelical Christians who were least likely to fully embrace Donald Trump? Which group of evangelical Christians were least likely to embrace Donald Trump? It's not what you're thinking. It's the ones who go to church every week. Evangelical Christians who go to church every week are less likely to fully get on the Trump train than self-identified evangelicals who don't go to church. You know how they say that people who go to church, self-identified Christians and non-Christians have the same divorce rate? Yes, self-identified Christians and non-Christians have the same divorce rate. But you know who has the lowest divorce rate in the country among Christians and one of the lowest in the country after Mormons and Muslims? Evangelical Christians who regularly go to church. You know the families who have the most stable, productive kids in America? Evangelical Christians who regularly go to church. If you're going to church regularly, you tend to have more stable families, more stable marriages, and you're less prone to swap politics and faith. So there's this story about the increase in politics and vulgarism, and cited in the piece is Christine Dumez, a historian who studies evangelicalism and masculinity. And you know what she cites? As with so many things with Trump, it's a longer history, but he also changed the game. She cites gleefully combative talk radio of the 1990s as a touchstone in the coarsening of evangelical mores. The shift is perhaps most visible in politics. Representative Lauren Boebert, who has called for an end to the separation of church and state, was caught on a security camera at a theater in September vaping and groping her date. Then there's Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's embraced the label of Christian nationalist, who drops vulgarities. And Nancy Mace, a Republican representative of South Carolina who joked about premarital sex and habitation at a Christian prayer breakfast. By the way, as an aside, I think it's notable that the three people noted are women. Oh, there's a theological point there to be made, but I'm not discussing theology today. I'm just discussing the media's completely screwing up of how they interpret these things. Here's the thing. Oh, and they also cite Jerry Falwell Jr., who, if anyone knows about Jerry Falwell Jr. is not actually a like regular engaged in church sort of evangelical believer. Now, they do cite Doug Wilson, who uses vulgarity and insults and stuff. But he's kind of the exception to the rule. Now, all of this is to say here, what the media continues to do is rely on people who hate evangelicalism to define evangelicalism. Let me just read for you the last two paragraphs of this New York Times piece. The partial embrace of vulgarity, Dr. Dumez points out, is happening in a moment of deep conservative outrage and often visceral disgust at the rising rates of non-traditional gender and sexual identities, particularly among young people. In that context, an indulgence in heterosexual lust, even if in poor taste, becomes seen as not just benign, but maybe even healthy and noble. Part of the reason transgender identities are considered a threat is that they blur gender differences, Dr. Dumez said. Against that backdrop, it's a wholesome thing for a boy to be lusting after a very sexy woman. Now, you should know that this woman wrote a book called it's like something about Christianity and John Wayne. And it gets a great deal of the evangelical story of the United States wrong, including suggesting that the idea of complementarianism, that is, that men are the head of the household and women complement the role of men, they're not equal in the house. That's a long-held Christian belief, even outside evangelicalism. She claims it came about in like the 1950s and 60s in the United States. And so here she is saying that part of the reason transgender identities are considered a threat is they blur gender differences. No, the reason transgenderism is considered not a threat but an abomination to a lot of Christians is because God created male and female in the very first chapter of the very first book of the Bible. And along comes man and says, actually, we know better, and boys can become girls and girls can become boys, and if you don't like it, you're a bigot and you need to be punished. That's the problem here. But you wouldn't get this from the New York Times. There's this very gorilla in the mist sort of vibe from so much of the media, and I'm kind of surprised about this from Ruth Graham at the New York Times, who does tend to report on religion and tends to have her finger on it. But when you rely on people who hate Christianity, and I think Dumez does hate evangelical Christianity in particular, authentic Christianity. I mean, she's come out on she's to the left on pretty much every issue. To rely on the left-wing critics to educate does a disservice to what otherwise could be a new story. I think there is something to be said about people like Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and Marjorie Taylor Greene being very brash and vulgar women who claim to be of faith. I think there's something to be said there about people embracing identities that are not authentic. I myself have used bad words. In fact, you go play golf with me, you're going to hear a lot of them, I guarantee you. But there is a difference, I think, between that and the regular embrace of the vulgar, the profane by some of these politicians. And by the way, I don't think it's a coincidence that it is women who are doing it, who are trying to be embraced in a world of shock jocks, so to speak. They're trying to up the ante to be embraced and to fundraise and to make a name for themselves and to be notable in their behaviors, to stand out among the field. That they try to weave Christianity into it, I think, well, they're going to be held accountable one day for that. But the New York Times does this whole story trying to explain this, and they get everything wrong. Now, I realize you're listening to Erickson, they do it all the time, but here's the point here. This is a group of people who pride themselves on taking on disinformation and misinformation, who regularly engage in it, and they lack the arrogance, or they lack the humility, rather. They're too full of arrogance to recognize they're getting it wrong, and they're misleading multiple thousands of other people in getting it wrong. And what they're doing to the right is what they do to the left, and they conform to their own prejudices and their own voices who make them comfortable in their prejudices. And so you come away less informed than more informed. And occasionally it does need to be pointed out by someone like me, who has a platform where I know my listeners, however much you lean right, I got a lot of listeners who tune in to find out what conservatives are saying. And these people read the New York Times, and they need to know, if you read a piece like this by Ruth Graham, who quotes extensively Dumez, you come away more ignorant of what's happening with Christianity in this country. You come away less informed. And you come away with an impression of a people of faith that's not authentic and is, in fact, the minority, not the majority. It's not just offensive, it's deeply ill-informed and malicious, I think, ultimately, in how this is framed. And if you want to understand why so many Christians are on Team Trump, that's what you should be explaining, how the media is out to get and malign evangelicals, and they go in support of a candidate who they feel like has their backs, which has led them to Donald Trump. It has nothing to do with misogyny and vulgarism, and everything to do with their deep contempt for the people on the left who they know are out to get them. That's led a lot of people to go to a bank like Old Glory Bank to do business with them, because they know that so many corporations are on the left these days, and they have hostile intent. In fact, some banks don't even want you to be able to use your bank account to buy things they oppose, whether it's guns or giving donations to conservative groups. They want to block it. Old Glory Bank has a banking bill of rights. You can see it at oldglorybank.com. It is my bank. I use them. They have no fees on their checking and savings accounts. Why my kids have their accounts with them as well, because they don't spend a lot of money, but I need to put their money somewhere, so give them a bank account with zero fees. Oldglorybank.com does that. You can get an account set up in less than 8 minutes. You can see the banking bill of rights. You can even get loans, like home loans from Old Glory Bank at very reasonable rates as well. VA, FHA, conventional loans, you name it. They are a great bank. They're my bank. They've got a great online portal, online bill pay, online budgeting tools. They're just phenomenal. I'm so glad to have them advertising. And by the way, full disclosure, I was a customer of theirs a year before they came to advertise. I'm not a customer because they advertise. They advertise because I'm a customer and I begged them to. That's how much I like them. OldGloryBank.com, member FDIC, equal housing lender. Terms and conditions apply. The lawyers make me say all that. Greetings, friends. How are you? It is Eric Erickson here. Grocery bills. We're going to have to talk about them when we come back. However, right now, this story has hit the wire at 1:47 p.m. A Lebanese man arrested at the southern border told U.S. authorities he traveled from the Middle East because he was a member of Hezbollah and planned to build a bomb once in the United States. Border Patrol agents in the El Paso, Texas region arrested Bassel Abadi of Lebanon after he allegedly crossed the U.S.-Mexico border on March 9th, according to an internal government document shared with the Washington Examiner this morning. While in custody, the 22-year-old man told Border Patrol agents that, quote, "I'm going to try to make a bomb." Abadi said he was traveling to New York City. Border Patrol called in agents from its Tactical Terrorism Response Team to speak with Abadi. After reading him his Miranda rights, Abadi told authorities he was a member of Hezbollah, an Iran-backed foreign terrorist organization. Hezbollah had assisted Hamas in its efforts attacking Israel since Hamas militants carried out their attack on October 7th. Abadi said he was fleeing Lebanon and Hamas because he didn't want to kill people, according to a separate immigration statement. He confessed that he trained with Hezbollah for 7 years, had been an active member of the terror group responsible for guarding weapons locations for 4 additional years, meaning he was recruited as an adolescent. His training focused on jihad, and he was trained to target people who were not Muslims. Which reminds me, wait until you hear about the sermon in Michigan over the weekend from an imam. I'll tell you about it.